As authors, we know that it's a smart choice to keep our book rights and our movie rights separate. So what does it look like to navigate the world of negotiating a book contract at the same time as a movie contract? Let's take a look.
Hi, I'm Kayvion Lewis. I'm the author of this book, Thieves Gambit, which comes out on September 26th, 2023 from Penguin, and I'm super excited to be here talking about all things publishing.
I'm really excited because we had a conversation with you about how you got your traditional book deal with Penguin. Today, we're going to talk about how you turned your book into a movie deal. So from a perspective of people who have not understood or not seen the behind the scenes of how a book gets turned into a movie, where did that process start for you?
I will say first that the whole process of a movie deal is a strange world to anybody. And even as it was happening to me, terminology was being thrown out that I did not understand, and I had no idea how the process worked. So I learned all of this in real time, thrown straight into like the deepest of deep ends.
Yeah.
So the first step in the process, I would say, is getting a film agent. It's similar to the first step in the process of getting a book deal being to get a literary agent. It's the same. You need a film agent to get anywhere big in the film world. I met my film agent through my literary agent because everything is connections, apparently. My literary agent sent my book to 2 film agents who represented another client of hers already. And she actually did not tell me that she sent my book to these agents because we were in the midst of talking to editors and our book deal at the time. And I think she didn't want to overwhelm me. So she just kind of mentioned one Monday after we were talking to an editor and we were just having a backup, like a recap call of that. She said, "Oh, by the way, I sent your book to these 2 film agents, a team of them at CAA, Creative Artist Agency, and they read it over the weekend and they love it. And they also want to represent you and they want to start sending the book out to interested parties today, like by the end of the day today."
Wow.
And my brain was fried because I was still coming off like the nervous high of having just talked to an editor at a major publisher. And so I kind of just said, "Okay, sure, but can I talk to them and can I also know their names?" And she was like, "Oh, right, of course. They actually said they're free like anytime today to talk to you." So from the get-go, I was grateful to have 2 film agents who were obviously really enthusiastic. So I was able to hop on a conference call with my literary agent and the 2 film agents, Dana Spector and Bertie Barta, and myself. And that happened literally 20 minutes after I learned that they existed and they had read my book. And it was a very vague, I don't want to say vague call, but it was a very like skin level call in terms of like the details of how everything was going to work, which I understand now that there was so much to be explained that it just wouldn't make sense for them to go into details with me. Right. Mostly at this point, I was just trusting my literary agent because I was like, "Do you trust them?" And she said, "Of course, I wouldn't send you to anybody who I didn't trust." And I said, "Okay, well, let them have at it." And I really didn't know at the time what they were going to be doing with my book or how anything was going to happen. I was just like, okay, I have film agents now. And I will say I also asked my literary agent after our conference call, "Do I need to sign anything?" And she said, "Oh, I know that's super confusing, but you actually don't need to sign anything with your film agents because my contract with my literary agent already includes like the film details and outsourcing to film agencies." So I've never signed any paperwork with my film agents, which sounds kind of sketchy, but I trust them now that I've seen contracts from studios that they've gotten me. So I've never signed anything with them on paper. And I just kind of said verbally, like, "Yes, I would like to be your client." And I left my book in their hands. So that was step 1, was my literary agent threw some film agents at me. And I said, "Sure."
All right, so once you have had your book sent to these film agents, they get really excited about them. They want to make you an offer to work with you. They're then going to go through the next steps of these processes. You then have to sit back and kind of wait for them to work their magic. Was this a long process for you or a short process?
I will say I know typically that it's a very long process. And that was also something that on the first 20-minute call with my film agents, they did try to brace me, and they say that usually Hollywood film deals for book, it's usually really, really slow. And so they were like, just, hold on tight. And I was totally okay with that. I know that my situation was atypical because things were not really slow. They ended up happening really fast for us. And my film agents, because they were so enthusiastic, like I said, they ended up sending out to interested parties that day. And they did end up sending me a list of different producers who they thought and territories who they thought would be interested in the book. So they put that together incredibly fast, and they sent me a list of, okay, here's all the people that we want that we're going to send this work out to and tell them about this amazing book that we just acquired. And they sent that out, like I said, before the end of the day on Monday. And this is the point where I thought, okay, and where usually you would be waiting for a long time because everybody has like so much going on. And I thought it was going to take a really long time for them to get back. I've never seen exactly, or I don't know exactly how the film agents pitch to different territories and producers. I don't know as much about that as I know how my literary agent pitches, but I assume it's probably something where if they're not sending an email out with a sort of description of the work, that they're calling or meeting face to face where they explain to people the type of work. But they did their job. They sent out to the list of people that they told me that they were sending out to. And for us, within a week, I had a list of, they kind of color coded my list. I think it was a list of maybe about 30 different territories and producers, and they color coded it with me in terms of, okay, like Black are the people that we've not heard back from, or like blue are the people who they said no, red are the people who are really interested and they are probably going to try and make an offer, hopefully. And then there was like a weird orange color where there's like, okay, these people are thinking about maybe making an offer. And so within a couple of days, they had that updated list with me, and they got on a call with me to explain, okay, here's the different people and what we think about all of them. And I will say there's this weird situation, or this weird terminology, that I had no idea what a territory was in the film world at the time, where I was like, wait, I didn't even know the difference between a producer and a studio at the time. So I was like, well, why do I need to choose if this production company is allowed to go to Netflix or not? Why does that make sense or anything? And so I was kind of stumbling through all this, but they explained to me how if some of these people were going to make offers, then I needed to choose, okay, who's the team that's going to be backed by Paramount or whatever. It was a lot of them explaining that to me in the middle of the night. My film agents, especially since they're in LA and I'm in Louisiana, they're a little behind me. So I've had a couple of calls at like 10 p.m. with them. But things happened really fast for us, and we had like some interested actual parties within a week. And I think within a week and before the auction for our book deal, we had 2 like official offers, official in the sense that they sent over paperwork with like specific like monetary amounts and details. And we would continue after our book deal to get more offers from different producers and some producers backed by studios. And for us, we ended up with 18 different offers, but that was in total over the course of maybe 3 weeks. So
So this process is a little bit longer than when your book is going to auction for different publishers. This can take a little bit longer. And for you, it was in the process of actually getting your book deal. So you were doing a lot. You had a lot of moving pieces and a lot of meetings all at the same time. And as you mentioned, especially with the movie industry, they are based on the West Coast, and I have heard from many, many people that they are getting those late night calls. So if you are an author in this position, be prepared for those late night conversations if you are over here on the East Coast or in Central Time. Tell us a little bit about who you ended up with, because I know you've got a lot of moving pieces, a lot of parts going on. What way do you make those ultimate decisions that you made?
Well, I will say that I was allowed to speak face to face with every single group or entity that was interested in making an offer. So I did talk to, it was over 18, I think. Well, it was 18 different parties who were offering, but some of the parties were a little divided up, like, oh, this executive is available now and this producer is available now. So I ended up having at least like 20 different calls where I was able to talk face to face with all of these different parties about how they wanted to adapt my work. And because there were so many different people, and there's adaptation is very different than, you know, actually publishing your book, because when you're looking for someone, it's your work that they want to publish, and adaptation is like, you know, how somebody feels about your work and what they want to change and everything. So there was definitely a lot more to discuss on those calls. My literary agent was amazing, and the fact that she didn't have to, but she was on every single call with me, and she took notes for me in every single call, so I didn't have to take any notes. By the end of it all, we ended up with like a 20-page document that had like the notes and thoughts from all of the different parties. We talked about the different types of mediums that all of the different parties wanted to adapt the work into. I'd say most of our offers were for TV shows, actually, which I was not expecting at all, because I think that Thieves Gambit, it's such like a cinematic, like 3-act story, but most of the offers were for television shows. So for all of those offers, I was able to ask, okay, how are you going to expand like the source material to like a multi-episode TV show?
Right.
And, you know, got a lot of interesting different thoughts on how people were going to do that. I also got to ask things like, it's a little like, you know, fanciful, like I'm daydreaming, but oh, do you have any cast members in mind? Or like, that question was asked to me a lot, actually.
Okay.
And I never really had any good answers, so I would like throw it back at people. Like, I don't know, who are you thinking, actually? It was also just kind of good to get to know sort of the teams as well. I will say that maybe when you're working on a book deal, I was a lot more interested in like the editorial aspects and what it's going to be like to work on this person on a technical level. But I knew for an adaptation that if I got overwhelmed with working on my book or working on my writing, I wanted to leave my project with a team who I would be comfortable taking a step back and not being as involved. And if I was going to do that, I needed to leave it in hands who I like completely trusted and I felt comfortable with. So I was looking at it in terms of, okay, if I had to like give this book like to somebody and say like adapt it, and I just wasn't going to be around, who I feel most comfortable leaving that book with and that responsibility with. And so it came down to, I'd say two teams, similar to the book deal, two teams who were like both of the heavy hitters. They both had major studio backing, and both of the teams I was really enthusiastic about, and they were comprised of directors and people who I knew very well and like admired a lot. But at the end of the day, and we were getting lots of offers and things during, we ended up going into a bidding war, which is kind of similar to an auction, but you know, that's the Hollywood term for it. These two heavy hitters, and their numbers were sort of similar as well. And I was able to talk a lot with my literary agent who'd been on all the calls with me. And she was like, who do you think you felt most comfortable with your work and with yourself? And also because she took all those notes from me, she was able to give the notes back to me, because she'd also written down on our recap calls, like my direct thoughts that I had after talking to the people. And after you talk to so many people, you can kind of forget how you really felt in the moment. But she is amazing. And so she brought that back to me, and she was like, I want you to know this is what you said, and this is how you said you felt right after you were speaking to these people. And after having all of that in front of me, it was pretty obvious to me, like, okay, these are the people that I actually felt really most comfortable with my work. So I ended up going with the amazing Temple Hill Production Studio. They are the producers and creators of, not creators, but adapters of Twilight and The Hate U Give, and lots of other amazing projects. And they partnered with two other producers, Christina Hodson, who is the writer of Birds of Prey and Bumblebee. And also she has a production studio called Hodson Imports, and an amazing director who already signed on. When I first spoke to him, he said that if he got this, he was going to take this and direct this personally as his next project. Stephen Capel, who directed Creed 2, which is like my brother's favorite movie, or one of his. So that was amazing. And the newest Transformers. So he's also a producer as well. That whole team is signed on, and they were backed by the amazing and YA like OGs, Lionsgate. You know, we all know did Twilight, and he did The Hunger Games as well. And they were all incredibly enthusiastic, and they were so much fun to talk to. And I'm glad my agent took notes, so I didn't just forget that after taking the call.
Yes.
So I ended up going with them, and it's amazing. I'm really happy with them.
So weigh in on this. When it comes to negotiations between publishers and the author, and an author and Hollywood, do you have more or less room for negotiations? Did you make a lot of negotiations in that contract, or did you just kind of run with what they had?
I'd say my film agents made a lot of negotiations. They sent me, it took about maybe 5 to 6 months for an actual contract to get put together. Because when they make you an offer, your contract with a film studio is going to be pretty long. I think my contract is about 80 pages long. So there are lots of like little like minutia in there and lots of it is jargon that I like could not understand. And there was lots of going back and forth on specific details, and my film agents were great about updating me on things that they were going back and forth to do. like, we want to get like this clause in here that will maybe get you a bonus if you get the bestseller list. And they came back and said that they want to do this instead. So there were lots of little changes in between, and my film agents, as a good film agent do, even though it went over my head, did send me the updated drafts of every different version of the contract with the changes like in red. So if you're comfortable, or if I was comfortable with just leaving it in their hands, I could, but also if I wanted to take it to a lawyer that I hired independently, I would be able to do that. And all of your agents should always be incredibly forthcoming, I'll say, with anything, any contract that has your name or your work in it. So there were different versions and going back and forth, but I was not as personally involved in that. I just left it in my agent's hands.
And as always here on the channel, we bring you the leading experts in the legal side of publishing. So if you have questions, if you need to talk about these contracts, go ahead and drop those questions down below and check out the playlist that we've got here on the channel to make sure that you are legally protected in the publishing space. As we said, it is incredibly important to make sure that you have a lawyer looking over anything that you are going to be signing, and that your agents are super forthcoming with whatever they are handing you in terms of those contracts. So make sure you ask the questions, make sure you have the legal representation, and drop questions down below because our experts coming back for even more episodes. Now tell me, as you were going through this process, is there anything else that people who are not experiencing this should be aware of?
I would just say, like, in general, do not be afraid to ask questions of anything that comes up while you're going through the process. So much of, like I said, the terminology and everything, like, I did not know like what was going on. And it's important to, of course, first and foremost, have a literary agent who should always be with you throughout this whole process and there to ask questions, because they're your number one advocate no matter what. I won't say that there was anything that I knew going in that I should be aware of, but there was a lot that like happened along the way that like I didn't just know the terminology of, and I'm glad that I had the teams and things around there to be there for me. Outside of that, I will say that Hollywood and movie people, and my film agents warned me about this, they're going to be incredibly effusive. If publishing people are incredibly gushy about your work, Hollywood is like, they take that like to a 10. And they also kind of warn me to take everything that you meet with anybody and they say with a grain of salt, like until it's like in contract, like in.
Yes.
Like there were times when I was speaking to some producers and things where you could kind of see like, oh, they're feeling me out to see like what I react best to. Like I am a big anime fan, and if anybody asks me about anime, I'll definitely like mention it. And I mentioned that to like a certain producer once, and then they immediately pivoted into, actually we meet with this anime studio and we could maybe make this into an anime. And I do not think that would ever like happen. So I would say take everything with a grain of salt, like until it's on a contract, on a piece of paper in front of you and legally binding. Like it's okay to be excited about things, but just be cautious as well.
That makes a lot of sense, and that is incredibly valuable advice for people who are jumping into the same space as you and are going through this process to make sure that they are staying safe and protected inside of getting your book made into a movie or a TV show or some other form of Hollywood magic, which we all one day hope to get to. And if you've got questions on this, go ahead and drop it down below. You are going to be coming back for more episodes to have further conversations on this, especially because movie deals take forever. They are going to take a really long time to get through that process. Things happen, things don't happen. We know the drill. We know the ups and downs of the movie industry. And so we hope that you will come back for even more future episodes to update us on what's going on, the behind the scenes of these things. In the meantime, where can everybody find you online to reach out and have conversations with you?
You can always find me on my website, KayvionLewis.com. I'm always open to getting messages or inquiries through my contact form there. And on the socials, you can find me on Instagram at KayvionCLewis or on X at Kayvion Lewis.
Perfect. Do you have time to do one more?
Yes, sure. What are we going into this time?
Okay. So we are going to have a conversation on the importance of not waiting on one manuscript to make your dreams come true. So let's have a... Oh, I'm sorry?
I said my favorite topic.
I know. I love it. I love that you had that conversation on your TikTok before it went away.
Yeah.
Are you bringing your TikTok back at some point? Is it just kind of like hidden for now, or?
I didn't delete it. It's just hidden.
Yeah.
So I might come back. I don't know. I was feeling a little down about it after my publisher was like, maybe don't talk about your numbers. And I was like, you guys said transparency. But So I was like, maybe I'll be back at some point.
It's hard for people to be transparent with those NDAs.
Yeah. I mean, there's no, NDA or anything in my contract. It's
Okay.
just kind of, an unspoken publishing rule that pretended wasn't a rule anymore, but it's still a rule. So
I think it's always helpful. And that gives people the power to negotiate too. So I like transparency.
Me too. Maybe when I'm like a super big baller author like Suzanne Collins, I can make my own rules.
Do whatever you want then.
Yeah.
I mean, now you're connected to Hunger Games, so.
Oh yeah, I have the power now, but not really. We'll see.
Exactly. All right, so let's jump into this conversation. We'll talk about your past work and how it ended up getting you to the point where you got your big book contract.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kayvion Lewis. I'm the author of this book, Thieves Gambit, which comes out September 26th, 2023 from Penguin, and I'm excited to be here to talk about all things writing and publishing.
And I'm excited too, because this is not your first book. You have other books out and you have written many manuscripts before you got this big traditional contract. So take us back to the beginning of your author career. How many books do you have published and how many manuscripts have you written before getting your book contract?
That is such a question. How many books have I written, you ask? Quite a few. I started writing about 5 years ago. I actually know my write-iversary. It's September 11th, 2018. And I only know that because Google Docs, has a function where you can go to document details and see the day that you created a document. And I still have the first document that I started writing. So this year will be my 5-year write-iversary, and I'm going to buy myself like a cake or something for it. Yes.
We should celebrate.
Oh, most definitely. It's like a holiday now. I immediately jumped into novel writing because I have no chill. I didn't start with a short story or anything, although I'd never written anything before. The idea had just sort of popped into my head of maybe I should be a writer, and I kind of decided to try it. So I opened up Google Docs and I started writing this over-the-top adventure story. And I think the first thing that you start writing is maybe a sign of the things that you should be writing, because when you have like no previous experience or nothing like in your head, like what's the first thing that comes out of your heart? And mine was this over-the-top adventure story that was not very well written because I had never written anything before. And it was very cliche and, two-dimensional characters, but that's a story that came out of my heart. And it's funny now because, 10 books later, Thieves Gambit is my 10th book that I've written. And it was the only other book that I decided I actually really liked at writing that over the top around the world adventure. I want to do that again. And that's the book that finally ended up, being the one. And it's one of the only books that, in addition to that first book, feels like so true to who I am as a person. So, but in between that, there were 8 other books in between Thieves Gambit and that first book. And all of those took me about 3 years to write. Every book, I think I got a little bit better as I went along. But with no writing experience in the background in my review, it definitely took a lot of trial and error to get to where we are today.
Well, I think that's so important to point out too. Oftentimes people think that the first book that they're going to write is going to be their big break because they're emotionally attached to it. And when it isn't, they walk away from the industry or they get really down on themselves. I love that you had the ability to write and then continue writing and then continue to learn and write. And your 10th book was the one that actually got you the big deal. So what advice do you have to people who are just starting out, who maybe think they have the best, shiniest, most wonderful book that isn't getting them anywhere?
It's such a hard question there, because you should be proud of any book that you've finished and any book that you've worked on. Like, love them. That's why I put all my books on this shelf, because this shelf is just as important to me as like the bookshelf at Barnes & Noble, because it's like you did something and you finished a work and it exists. It's real. But also, and you have to think of it in terms of, okay, do you want to be a writer or do you want to be an author? And to me, those are two different things. Being a writer is something that, like, it has nothing to do with anybody else. It has nothing to do with the industry. Yep. It's just you. Are you somebody who creates stories and writes? And it's okay to just want to be a writer too.
Yes.
But to be an author it's a career. And to succeed in a career, you have to improve and you have to learn to take feedback and you have to adjust and evolve and pivot. So it's okay if you just want to be a writer, but if you want to be an author, you need to have a critical eye and to almost separate yourself from the work when you go into that author sort of mindset. And you have to look at your own work, and it's hard in terms of like as a commodity. Like, okay, is this something that people are connecting with? Is this something that people are going to want to purchase? Is this something that I can fix and improve? And once you get yourself into that mindset of, okay, I'm an author today and I'm not a writer, you have to be able to go through and say, okay, well, this book, I love it as a writer, but it's not working, it's not selling. And I'm going to have to eventually write something new anyway, because you don't, as an author, you don't get to write one book and move on. Yeah. So you need to carry on, write something new, start something new, get better. Every time you do something, you get a little bit better than you were before. It's so hard. That's why one of the reasons I have this shelf as well is that I'm like, okay, even though this book didn't go anywhere, it's still on the shelf, it's still important, but I need to carry on and keep going and keep getting better. If that makes sense.
That is something we talk about a lot on my platforms, that you are going to have to constantly improve, that there is kind of a difference between writing for yourself, writing as a hobby, writing because you love it, and being an author as a career and treating it like a business and constantly looking to critically improve what you're doing. So I'm very glad that you said that and you pointed that out. And I love that you have those as a reminder to yourself of what you did and where you've gone and how far you've gone in what you're doing. Now, for you, are you somebody who likes to go back to your old manuscripts and revise them and look at them critically and level them up to where you are now? Or are you somebody who says, this was my learning experience, it's great, but I've moved on?
I think it definitely depends on the project. Most of the projects that were early on in my writing journey, they would take so much work these days to get up to the level that I am now that I don't think that the return would be worth the work, if that makes sense. And also, as you move on and you're writing new projects, those also take more time to work on, and you have to kind of delegate your time these days. Like, okay, is my time better spent working on this new project that might be a little bit more nuanced and might have a little bit more promise right here? Or do I really want to go back and rework this old project that has been on the shelf for 2 or 3 years? If you're super in love with a project, of course, remind yourself you can always come back to it, or you can always poach parts of previous projects for new projects and rework them. There are no rules, really, especially when you're just working on a project by yourself before you've got it with your agent or editor. You can do whatever you want. But I also always try to be pragmatic and practical with my time as an author. And also the fact that, as a writer, there are always new ideas and premises popping into your head. And for me, at least, the new ideas always seem a little bit shinier than the old ones that I was working on like 2 or 3 years ago. There are some projects that I worked on that they're so cool and so unique and have such interesting premises that I'm like, okay, this is something that I really, really think I could like rework into something amazing. And so it's on the, to be rewritten list. But, at the moment, I'm like, what's most important for me to work on right now? And usually it's just something that's a little bit newer.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, for you, did you query those older manuscripts, or were you really using those as a lesson to get to the point where you are now?
I did query most of them, but I will say I did fall into that trap, as I think most young aspiring writers do, or aspiring writers of any age, where you do think that your first book is amazing. And you are the one exception to the rule that, first books are not very good, but your book is amazing and everybody's going to want it. So I did query most of those early projects. I think only a handful of those books that I did not query. Varying degrees of success. The first book that I queried, no bites at all. Like my second book I had a couple of agents interested in, or full requests at least, which blew my mind at the time, but none of those panned out. One of the books on the shelf did technically get me like an agent offer, although the offer was rescinded after I started talking about the projects that I wanted to write in the future, and it did not align with that agent, which jokes on them because I wrote Thieves Gambit like 4 months later. And another one of the books I ended up selling without an agent to a small press is this book right here, The Half Class, which is currently out of print, but it was published by a real publisher. So although Thieves Gambit number 10 is my big book, I had not just the learning experience with all the other books, but all of them have their own different stories in terms of how well did agents react to it. Some of them had offers, some of them technically got published, and I kind of also get to look back at those and see, okay, where I was in my journey and how I was slowly inching up as time and manuscripts went on.
And I think it's really valuable to point out it's a process. The entire publishing world is a process. It's a process to write your novel. It's a process to query your novel. It's a process to get your book deals, to get your movie deals, to go through the point of publication, hitting those bestsellers lists. And no matter what you do, as long as you're doing something that feels good and right and valuable to you, it is a learning step on the path to success. If you keep going, you are going to get to where you want to be. Any final advice for writers who are trying to get into the world of publishing?
Just to be tenacious, and as cliche as it sounds, like, don't stop writing. Like, you're not going to get anywhere if you stop. And I think you should be doing this first and foremost because you love it, because creating as an artist, as a visual artist or as a writer, it's something that starts with that personal spark of inspiration and that personal love for it. So when you're first sitting down and writing a project, make sure you're writing a project that you love, you know. Worry about editing on a technical level, and worry about improving and everything and revising later. From the first step or starting writing Once Upon a Time, don't start your story with Once Upon a Time. But, you know, for example, you should be in love with it. But after that, keep going. Don't get discouraged because, okay, it's not happening yet. And I thought I would have an agent. I thought I would have a book and a movie deal by now. Everything happens in its own time, and everybody's on their own path. Keep writing because you know you love it, because you're a writer and that's who you are. Keep writing, keep going, be tenacious. You'll never get anywhere if you stop.
I love that. Where can everybody reach out to you to learn more about your books and your author journey?
Definitely hit up my website, Kayvion Lewis, at just KayvionLewis.com. And you can find me on Instagram at Kayvion C. Lewis and X at Kayvion.
Drop your questions down below because we've got authors just like Kayvion coming back to answer more questions. And I'm a multi-time best-selling author. I've been in this industry for a really long time, and I'm here to help you make this your most profitable year inside of publishing ever. From your writing to your publishing to your marketing, we want to take the time and the stress and the work and the effort out of this to make this your most profitable author year yet. And we want to make sure that we're doing this in a way that you are living your best life while also living out your author dreams. Drop your questions down below, and we'll see you in the upcoming episodes.